Every character, location, or experience you've read about in my crime fiction novels holds a piece of reality. I'm Helen Taylor. Welcome to the story behind my stories, the video podcast where crime fiction meets my authentic experience. Here, we delve into the real-life inspirations and intimate stories that shaped my novels. Discover how my everyday encounters, adventures, and travels translate into tales as gripping as they are genuine. The story behind my stories goes behind the words on the page to reveal the backstory that inspires my writing. Hit follow or subscribe and ensure you're part of this journey. Hi. Welcome to Story Behind My Story, Part 2. So, we left it last week when I had just got to Bangkok. So then, from Bangkok, I caught a flight to Koh Samui. I don't want to be detrimental to Koh Samui, but Koh Samui is very touristy. It is almost like the Costa del Sol in Thailand. These amazing, luxurious beach bungalows and taxis everywhere and lots of restaurants and bars. Whereas Koh Phangan, which I didn't know at this point, but when I got there, is a backpacker's place. It's a lot more rougher. It's off the beaten path. There is a main boat that goes from Surrey on the mainland to Koh Samui and then goes to Koh Phangan. I believe it then goes to Koh Tao and back to Surrey. But Koh Phangan is definitely the backpacker side of Thailand, or at least was when I went. So my first flight to Koh Phangan was also quite scary. And whilst it originally was in the first draft of tie-dye, it hasn't made it into the final version of tie-dye. It was a smaller plane and there was a storm, so there was lightning and I was gripping the side of my seat as I came in thinking I'm never going to land. This was before I had spent any time in Thailand, and as I've said, Asia was not a place I ever wanted to go, so it didn't start the journey great. But landing on Koh Samui, I will always remember that. It's a tiny little airport with almost a shed as the terminal, but gorgeous, beautiful orchids and flowers everywhere. Stunning looking manicured lawns around this wooden building. And I got off the plane and I walked through the terminal building and out where there were plenty of taxis, as Paul had said on his email, ready for me to get to the pier. Now there's two piers on Koh Samui. One takes you on the bigger ships, bigger ferry type boats to Surrey on the mainland, and the small boats that go from the other pier that take you over to Koh Phangan Hadrin side. Hadrin is the town that hosts the full moon party. So I was already a little uneasy that that's where Paul had told me to go, that he lived near Hadrin, which I wouldn't have been surprised knowing Paul, but wasn't my thing. It definitely wasn't my thing. The connotations of the drugs and the drink and just the wildness of the full moon party. So I got a taxi, told them where I wanted to go as per Paul's message, and I arrived at the pier ready to get the boat over to Koh Phangan. Now at this point I am going to revert to Tie-Dye, the book, and read you the section where Goodwin takes that boat over to Koh Phangan, as that is my memory of that initial journey before I had ever been to Koh Phangan or knew anything about it, which is exactly the situation that Goodwin was in, going to visit his daughter. So I'm going to read you that bit now. Matthew Goodwin shuffled with the backpackers along the rickety pier. Excited voices filled the sapphire-coloured bay as battered and stained rucksacks were hauled from pier to boat across a flimsy plank, with negligible effort or attention. I'm going to stop there. These guys obviously did this all the time. It was literally a two planks together, thin planks that you walked across with the boat off the pier. The pier was just went out into the sea, wobbly, felt unstable. You walked out there, you walked across these tiny planks, 2 planks, with the boat moving. These guys were stood in the middle just shifting rucksacks and boxes and food, because they obviously also took cargo, if you like, for locals across. And they're just throwing these things across. Perfect balance, no problem at all with any of that. And it was amazing to watch, but also pretty scary that you're going to get on that boat, and just the stability of it really felt very I can't think of the word, very naive. That is the word I want to use, but I will continue. Goodwin found space on the deck of the boat and dropped his bag against the wheelhouse. Sitting with his back against it, he stretched his long legs out so his feet hung over the side of the boat. So if you can imagine, you have the boat and literally you have a wheelhouse in the middle, and it's not big. It's not a big boat at all. So with the wheelhouse in the middle, you could sit with your back against it and your feet be over the side. So you couldn't walk up and down the side of the wheelhouse once the people were on it, because that was taken up with people sat there, and people just sat anywhere. Kept their luggage with them, no life jackets, nothing like that. As the boat pulled out and into the open gulf, Matthew took in the scene around him. Sun-drenched bodies were draped all over the deck. 2 young men took advantage of their section of deck to sleep, bare backs starting to redden as the sun did its work. Nearby, a group of lads sat on the deck railings, smoking cigarettes and swigging beer, chatting in a language he didn't recognise. A fair-skinned girl applied suntan lotion to herself as her friend plaited her hair. Couples sat between each other's legs. One girl traced her lover's simple tattoo with the tip of her finger. Another played distractedly with the ring in her companion's nipple as he spoke to her, fondling her own lip ring with her tongue. So hopefully that gives you a sense of, you've got this glorious azure blue sea, and the sun's beating down, and you're on this tiny little boat with the carefree. Carefree is the best way to describe the people running the boat, driving the boat, and all of the people on the boat. I did feel that little bit out of place. There were a lot of them were teenagers and early 20s, let's say, and I was in my early 30s at that time, so I felt a little bit out of place there. Goodwin is 10 years older than me, so more so him. It was obvious that this was not the first time these people had done trips like this. Where else in the world had they been? He wondered. What else had these people experienced to grow so much in confidence compared to the teenagers he dealt with back home? So they were confident, probably more so that it was the situation that they were in. This wouldn't have been their first boat ride on a boat like that, but it was mine. So I was quite nervous going across the sea to Hadrian. So then when we docked in Hadrian, it was a very similar situation on that end. And again, a rickety sort of pier, a little bit more stable, but still a rickety pier, couple of planks off of the ship, boat. I call it a ship, but it wasn't, it was a boat. And then you walked along this longer pier out, almost, it had obviously been paved so that it was suitable for all the vehicles, all the taxis to come down, but it was literally just enough space for them to come, turn around, etc. And there were lots of taxis there. They clearly all came to the pier when there was a boat coming in, because there were places to stay around Hadrian, but the majority of people went out from Hadrian, and that was what Paul had told me to do: get a taxi and tell them that you want to go to Charm Beach, which is where he was staying. So then I got a taxi, and clearly for it to be financially viable for them, they wait until they've got a full load going that way. I didn't know at the time, but it's pretty much a straight road from Hadrian all the way to Tongsalar at the other end of the island. And Tongsalar was the main town, Hadrian was the social town, and that road between the two went through several villages and along the coast, so there was a lot of resorts along the coast. I say resorts, not resorts like Koh Samui, which were built as tourist resorts. These resorts had a couple of bungalows and some wood on stilts, little rooms, if you like, that the Thai stayed in, or long-term residents on the island stayed in, of which Paul was one. So he had one of these ones built on stilts that were very small little rooms. I had what was relative luxury when I got to Charm Beach, but that ride, Paul had warned me that not to be too nervous or worried about it, and that the guys drove that route day in, day out, and it was not something to be scared of. But again, I used my experience of that journey the first time for Goodwin when he made that journey to meet his daughter. He wasn't staying at Charm Beach, but he was. I just called it something different in the book. So I'm going to read you how, as it gives you an idea of how that area was as we drove from Hadrin through Bantai, Bangkai and to Charm Beach, which was just outside Tonsala. The boat docked at Hadrin. Goodwin disembarked and strode along the concrete pier to the road. Lining the entrance of the pier were many Songtao, Thai taxis. "Where you go?" asked an old Thai with a dark moustache covering his sun-withered face. "Chok Dee Resort," replied Goodwin. "Chok Dee," the old man Thai repeated, nodding. He pointed to one of the Songtao standing almost full. Okay, Tong Sala." He shouted in Thai to the man on the roof of the Songtao, placing luggage within the low bars surrounding it. Goodwin passed his bag up to the other man, but kept his day pack with his money, passport and flight tickets with him and climbed into the back. So, if you can imagine, these are a bit like 4x4s, and it's not a roof rack, but it's parallel bars that go around the top of the vehicle that are sort of that high so that you can just pile a load of luggage in and it won't fall off the sides, and then they would tie it down if there was more. But they just, again, like the guys on the boat where they just were chucking these great big heavy rucksacks all over the place, it was the same. Somebody'd chuck it up to the guy at the top and he would just drop it in the space inside these bars, and they'd almost be like vaulting onto the top like you would a horse, or jumping down, and very, very agile, and just chucking these great big rucksacks around all over the place. Okay, so Goodwin and the other 9 passengers all waited in silence for a few minutes until 3 more people joined them. One squeezed on the red vinyl seat opposite Goodwin. The other 2 stood on the board at the back of the vehicle, hanging onto the luggage rail above them. So, where this rail that went round the top, there was steps on the back for you to get in, and 2 people stood on the back holding onto the luggage rail. So, health and safety is not something Thailand knew anything about back in 2002 when this happened for me. So, and the red vinyl seats, you think, okay, you think nothing of it until you've been in there a while and you may have bare legs, and then you will get packed in and it's steaming hot, sun shining down. Imagine that. So now this is the actual journey. The taxi left Hadrin, the party town, moving down dirt tracks, bumping around over the uneven surface until it came to a more forgiving one. Turning onto this, it picks up some speed. Goodwin realised that although the road had been built within the last few years, maintenance of it had not seemed to be of great importance to the Thai population. Potholes were unavoidable, throwing the taxi and its passengers from side to side. The driver seemed to make no attempt to dodge them. Where greater stretches of road were missing, the driver either swerved around them or slowed so the vehicle dropped into the holes and out again, causing his passengers to leave their seats and fall back into them. In other places, the traffic slid on the clay that had been washed over the road by the rainfall flowing out of the jungle that blanketed the hills. The occupants of the taxi were well aware of the precarious nature of their journey, and when approaching traffic could be seen, grips tightened, taut arms tried to keep the bodies anchored, and everyone breathed in, as if trying to make the whole taxi slimmer as the drivers inched past each other. Suddenly, a wheel dropped into a ditch. The driver swung the steering wheel away from the danger, missing the other taxi driver by nothing more than an inch as traction pulls it back onto the road. So, hopefully that gives you an idea. These roads are not, we may complain here in the UK about potholes, nothing compared to those in Thailand. And the thing was that as you came out of Hadrian, you just had sheer rock on one side, and then this road that it was just wider than a vehicle. So when you were single file, fine. Didn't matter that there was a sheer drop down the other side, just direct to the sea, with the rocks and everything. But when you had to pass somebody, that's when it got exciting. But it was... I did the trip so many times afterwards that you do, as Paul had said, don't worry about it, it's fine, they do it day in, day out, there's never a problem. And there never was in all the time that I was there. But that first time, it is quite scary to do that trip. So, I'll read another extract. The man to Goodwin's left wiped the sweat from his face with the front of his t-shirt, leaving a dark imprint. Goodwin did the same with his sleeve. One of the Manu fans peeled each sticky leg from the vinyl seat in turn, pulling his shorts lower to shield his bare skin. That's what I meant about the vinyl seats. You just stick to it. You know that if you've been anywhere hot and you've sat on a vinyl seat, you know. You stick to it and it just gets uncomfortable. And because you're so packed in there, you're all trying not to touch each other, and somebody might be wearing a bikini top, or a guy might just be wearing shorts. And so not only are you sticking to that, but you're touching each other with bare skin, sweaty bare skin. So you've got that mixed in with the fact that the taxi is bouncing from side to side, up and down, through the potholes, and you're falling all over each other all the time as well. The road continued to wind round sharp bends, rock walls to one side, sheer drops down to the gulf below on the other. Approaching the next hill, the taxi pulled over. Now, this was really funny. The taxi pulled over and you think, why is he stopping? But he got out, he came round and he's like, come off. That hill's too steep, I can't take you up there, is effectively what he was saying in stilted English. And we all had to walk up this steep bit of hill. So you're all hot and sweaty and you have to walk up this steep hill, and then the taxi chug, and you can hear it straining and chugging to get past you, and then round the bend, and you can see it's still going up, but once you're around that bend, the steepness is less and the taxi can take you again. So then it gets everybody to pile back into the taxi. Your luggage stays on the top, you don't have to carry that. But he then gets you to pile back into the taxi to continue the journey. And so I incorporated that into the book too, and I'll read you that section. The road continued to wind round sharp bends, rock walls to one side, sheer drops down to the gulf below on the other. Approaching the next hill, the taxi pulled over. The driver came round to the back of the truck. Too big, too good, not good, too much heavy, you walk, he said to them, motioning with his hands for them to climb out of the truck. The young man between Goodwin and the open back climbed out. Goodwin laughed, lines grouping around his eyes. He struggled and followed him. He turned to look up the hill. It went round a bend, still rising. That was very much me. I just thought it was funny. this first time, you're paying for a taxi, and you get in, and it's uncomfortable, there's too many people in there, you're stuck to the seats, all of this, and then you have to get out and walk a section of it because the taxi can't cope. In the heat, it was a difficult climb. Clothes dripping in sweat, he rounded the corner alone and stopped. The bulk of the group came up behind him. The hill just kept climbing. It's less steep, but nonetheless still upwards. The taxi chugged up, pulling into the side just in front of them. The driver hung out of his window, waving them to climb back in, shouting, "It's okay now, I take you, I take you." And so that was what they did. And then in the book I talk a little bit about other journeys in Asia. As there was always talk of what was the worst journey and the reasons why. These were backpackers. They had travelled all over Asia, and they liked to give the benefit of their experience to other backpackers, so that you knew for this journey, don't take the such and such truck, take the closed one, and then for this journey do this, etc. And so I try and give a little bit of a taste of that in the book, so that you get the idea that he is a fish out of water. He's a British detective who has never been anywhere like this before, and has never been surrounded by these sorts of people unless it's been in a police station, because he's not their generation, he's not their age, etc. And it wasn't mine either. So I drew a lot for Goodwin on my own experience and story there in Thailand. So the truck then ends up on much more flatter ground, and you're not up in the cliffs area so much, and it's pretty straight from there on. And there's road, there's dust and fields either side then, once you've passed that bit. And so you go off the road to overtake or pass another one, because the road is still only just wider than a car. But you just, it's fine from then on. And you go through a couple of villages, and there's a 7-Eleven, which is sort of the only thing that is a concession to the Western world, if you like. Despite the fact that the Thais love America and England, and they just want to be like us, but that is like what they've seen of us on TV. So then in the book, Goodwin arrives at Charm Beach, as did I. His is called Chok D. I'm going to Charm Beach, and that's when I get to Charm Beach. So join me next week, where we will do the arrival at Charm Beach, and again I will use some extracts from the book to describe to you how I felt and how I saw it that first time I arrived at Charm Beach, and so you can get an idea of what Charm Beach looks like. And you will see some of the photos as we go through this, which are the real photos that I took when I was there, that I then drew on in order to write tie-dye. See you next week.